Back in 2011, I was involved in a car accident. At the time, I broke my left leg so badly that I needed to undergo multiple surgeries. During my recovery, I experienced constant and severe pain. For more than 6 months, I was unable to walk normally. To relieve my pain, my doctor prescribed pain medication and advised me to use it as directed. When I first started taking them, I thought the painkillers were really effective in relieving my pain. But as time went on, I began to become dependent on the painkillers. I found that if I didn't take my pain medication regularly, my pain would become unbearable again. It was an ordeal for me. For a while, I tried to stop taking the medication in hopes of being able to stop relying on pain medication. However, I soon found that this was difficult to do. In the process of stopping the medication, I felt like a drug addict. My mind kept telling me that I needed the medication to relieve the pain. Now, I still need to use pain medication to control my pain. Some people may think I get high when I take these pain medications, but that is not the case. When I take these painkillers, I don't feel too strongly. Instead, I could smell this medication every time. It was a disgusting taste that made me feel very uncomfortable every time I swallowed it. One morning, I had a very bad cough. I thought I might have the flu. Therefore, I decided to take a sick day off to rest at home. I took some cold medicine, but the next day, I didn't feel better. My condition became more serious. I felt so weak and tired that I could hardly get out of bed. At night, the pain in my left leg also became worse. I had taken painkillers on time, but they didn't seem to have any effect. Even though I felt very nauseous, I took the rest of the painkillers in the hope that they would relieve the pain. It was very frustrating to have to deal with the illness and pain alone during this time. I hoped I would be able to get back to health soon. After about an hour, my head was spinning and I was having a very hard time breathing. I felt very uncomfortable, as if I was submerged in water. I quickly called the emergency number and told them about my symptoms. When I arrived at the hospital, I was examined by a doctor. The doctor told me that I just had a bad case of the flu and advised me to get plenty of rest and maintain adequate water intake. He also gave me some antibiotics to help me fight the virus. On the morning of the 3rd day, I felt my condition was getting worse and I could barely hear in my ears. My mother also came to my house and saw that I was in very bad condition and took me to the local emergency room. The nurse examined me physically and advised me that I needed to go to a larger hospital. On the way to the other hospital, my breathing became very difficult. I thought it was the oxygen mask, so I took it off. The nurse immediately put the oxygen mask back on me. I remember that nurse was so upset that every time I tried to take off my mask, she promptly put it back on me. As I lay in the hospital bed, I knew the doctors and nurses were doing their best to resuscitate me. But the content of their conversations was not promising. My vision began to blur, and the bright colors gradually dimmed and eventually turned into darkness. I began to feel my body become lighter, as if I were floating in the air. I realized I was leaving my body, and it was a wonderful feeling. I suddenly felt much better. My breathing became easier and I was able to hear sounds around me. Unfortunately, the peace didn't last long. I heard a sound that sounded like white noise from the TV. But this sound was harsher and more confusing. It got louder and louder, and I felt like I was falling into a sea of noise. I wanted to return to the real world. But I felt like I was being pulled into a black hole, and there was no way for me to escape. The screams that were getting louder and louder, and my mind started to become confused. I began to feel fear. Hell was so real. It was filled with endless evil and fear. As I stepped into this horrible place, I was surrounded by a strong stench that made me feel sick. I tried to breathe fresh air, but everything around me was so dirty and disgusting. All around me, I saw many horrible things. The creatures looked like snakes, and they were very large in number. They were constantly wrapping themselves around me. Their scales rubbed against my skin, causing me to feel tingling and discomfort. No matter how much I struggled and resisted, they never seemed to stop. It was an endless cycle, and I could not escape the torture. Then, I appeared in a red space again. At first, the color was relatively light, but soon, the red began to become darker and darker. Everything around me was red, only in different shades of color. The smell of decay permeated the surroundings. I tried to find my way out. However, no matter where I went, I could not leave this place. There was not the slightest sign of lifelessness in this world. I couldn't see any plants or animals, not even a hint of wind. It was a dead world that made me feel overwhelmingly lonely and desperate. Suddenly, I heard moans of pain and screams of terror. These sounds filled my surroundings and made me feel very panicked. Here, there was a heat wave in the air, just like the feeling you get when you turn on the oven. I walked in the direction of the sound, and I tried to find the others. All I could hear were screams, but I couldn't see anyone. Every step I took was hard. When I got to the edge of a cliff, I saw some monsters below. It felt like those horrible monsters were waiting for me. Their faces were twisted and their sharp teeth were exposed. I tried to walk around the beasts, but every movement I made alerted them. I felt that they could sense my fear. As I moved, their eyes followed me. I felt like they were devouring my soul. The sound of these monsters is also terrifying. They made hoarse growling noises, like they were waiting for me to fall. Just as I was feeling desperate, a bright light appeared above my head. It shone with a dazzling light. I looked up and saw a huge angel who flapped his huge wings. I knew I had been saved. The angel held out her hand ready to lead me out of here. I followed her lead and felt an overwhelming sense of peace and reassurance. Eventually, we arrived at a beautiful place. The air smelled like flowers, and I knew I was saved. The angel turned to me and waved, then disappeared into the light. I had come to a place where there was no suffering or pain. This should be heaven. Suddenly, I saw a young lady. She was walking toward me, and she was wearing a gorgeous white robe. As she approached, I was surprised to find that she was my grandmother. Here she looked to be in her 30s. My grandmother told me that this was heaven, a place free from pain and trouble. She gently stroked my hair. Then, gave me a warm hug. She told me that my mission was not over and that I had to go back. She assured me that she would be with me no matter where I was. Finally, she disappeared in the light. Suddenly, my soul returned to the hospital. I saw myself lying in a hospital bed. My mother was holding my hand tightly. Over and over again, she said, "You have to wake up, you can't leave us." Her voice was full of worry. I knew I was in extreme danger. The doctors told my mother that my life was in danger and my chances of survival were very slim. The doctors advised my mother to tell my other loved ones to prepare for the worst. My body had been suffering from severe oxygen deprivation, which had been going on for several days. All of my organs were failing and my health condition became worse. Upon hearing the news, my mother burst into tears. I could feel her desperation and helplessness. I realized that I had to get back into my body as soon as possible. I tried many times without success. I closed my eyes and began to confess to God, pleading with Him to give me another chance. After a while, I felt a surge of energy gathering inside me. A bright light was emanating from my soul. This energy was sending me back into my body. I finally re-entered my body. My breathing became clear. My hearing and vision also slowly began to return to normal. When I woke up again, it was the afternoon of the next day. The sound of machines was all around me. I tried to sit up, but my body still felt weak. I had an oxygen mask on and a tube in my throat. As time went on, I got better. I was transferred to a general ward. Half a month later, I left the hospital. I kept wondering if I would have been able to return here that day without the presence of an angel. I realized that life is so fragile. I began to pay more attention to my health and improve my lifestyle. I knew that the angel's presence was God's forgiveness and mercy to me. The first week after I was discharged from the hospital, I still felt pain in my left leg. But I began to try to restrain myself from using pain medication. However, such attempts soon ended in failure. I became increasingly anxious and restless. I became unable to concentrate and even began to worry that this condition would continue. It was at this time that I met a woman who is now my wife. She used to suffer from severe alcohol dependency, but she eventually managed to kick it. She told me that I needed to find my inner strength in order to truly stop being dependent on painkillers. After talking and thinking with her for a long time, I gradually understood the meaning. I began to learn to accept my pain and discomfort instead of blindly relying on the painkillers to make me feel better. I began to learn to use other methods to relieve the pain, such as meditation and yoga. After 3 months of hard work, I gradually overcame my dependence on painkillers. My body began to adapt to the pain, and I became stronger and more confident.
When I was 19 years old, I received shocking news. My boyfriend had been murdered by 2 robbers. I was overwhelmed with grief at this news. He was only 20 years old and his life was just beginning. But now, he had left me and his family forever. This fact is hard for me to accept. It was the first time I had ever been so close to death, and the experience made me realize the fragility and brevity of life. I felt helpless and lost, because I could not change the fact that it had already happened. I began to question the meaning of life and lost interest in everything. Why go to school? Why work? Why get married? These questions plagued me. In the shadow of death, life seemed to become meaningless. I tried to seek help from my teachers and the pastor of my church, but no one could give me satisfactory answers. My mood became more and more depressed, and eventually I fell into a severe depression. In this situation, I turned to my parents for help. They took me to see a psychiatrist. The doctor prescribed some medication for me, which I took for 2 weeks as instructed. My parents also often accompanied me on trips, which gradually helped me to get rid of my psychological distress. For years later, a tragedy happened to me again. My best friend from high school died in a traffic accident. We had many good times together, and we shared many important moments. He was a very important person to me. We had made many wonderful promises, but now he is gone from me forever. After this, I felt intense loneliness and pain. My parents' relationship had also become increasingly strained and they were considering divorce, which made me even more depressed and helpless. I felt abandoned and that no one could understand my pain and grief. I tried to find support and comfort, but it seemed like no one could really understand my inner world. I fell into a state of despair and felt like my whole world was falling apart. I decided to write a letter to my parents to express my disappointment and dissatisfaction with them. I knew it wasn't an easy decision, but I felt I had to do it. I found paper and a pen and sat down quietly in my room. I worked hard to translate my emotions into words so that my inner feelings could be expressed. I told them about my disappointment in them and how I thought they were not fulfilling their responsibilities as parents. I thought they had never really paid attention to me or understood the pain I was feeling inside. I told them that I wanted to cut off contact with them. I did my best to let them know what I really thought. When I finished writing this letter, I felt a little lighter. I put the letter on my desk. That night, I was in a very low mood. My friend wanted to help me get rid of this mood, so he invited me to a bar to relax. In the bar, we started drinking and enjoying this feeling of freedom. I felt immersed in an endless emptiness and could not get rid of this emotion. My friends noticed the change in my mood and they were worried about me and wanted to help me. One of my friends brought out some medications that claimed to make me feel better. I didn't know the names of these medicines or what the ingredients were. At that time, I just wanted to get rid of this low mood. So I didn't hesitate to take them. As time went on, I started to feel dizzy and then started vomiting. My friends tried to help me, but I felt like I was completely out of control. When I arrived at my friend's house, my consciousness started to become blurred. I felt that my soul and body had separated. Everything around me became abnormally quiet, as if time and space had stopped. This feeling was very bizarre and made me feel frightened and uneasy. I didn't know where I was or how to get back to the real world. I quickly passed through a dark space, and then appeared in a brightness. The lights were so bright that I felt a little dizzy. In this space full of light, I felt that everything was blended together to form a complete whole. This feeling was so real. Here, all my questions were answered. Every question I had, I could get a clear answer to. This place is like my forever home, the earth is just my temporary residence. I see pieces of my former life flash before my eyes. I saw my childhood, and my teenage years, and all my experiences on earth. I was amazed and moved by these moments, because I understood the true meaning and value of all these experiences. I saw that the experiences that had caused me pain and distress now made sense. I felt that God knew me more deeply than I knew myself. I realized that no matter what I experienced on earth, I was under God's control. He has a perfect plan for my life. Life itself is a precious gift. We should cherish it to create wonderful memories and experiences. In this place, I found my home and I understood the true meaning of life. During this experience, I met my friend who died in a car accident. Although I couldn't see him, I could feel his presence. When I communicated with my friend, we no longer needed words. We were able to feel each other's presence and thoughts directly. My friend used to be an atheist. After coming here, he believed in the existence of God and he understood the meaning and value of life. My friend's presence gave me great comfort and confidence. I understood that even though he had left this world, his soul was still alive. This made me believe even more that death is not an end but a beginning. In this space, I felt that my soul is eternal and that our existence has meaning. At some point during this experience, I was asked to make a choice. I could let my soul stay here, which meant I would truly die. Or I could choose to return to Earth and complete the mission I had not yet completed. In that moment, I suddenly thought of my friend. I didn't want her to wake up and find out I was dead. I couldn't let her have such a horrible experience, and I didn't want her to live with self-blame for the rest of her life. I also realized that there were still things I wanted to do that I hadn't done. So I decided to return to Earth and continue to pursue my dreams and goals. I felt grateful that I still had a choice. When I decided to return to Earth, I felt myself gradually detaching from that space. There was a force that was helping me to return to the real world. This force grew stronger and stronger, making me gradually aware of my body and my surroundings. I began to feel the weight of my body. I felt my breathing gradually increase and my heart began to beat faster. I heard the sound of a vehicle's horn. When I fully returned to the real world, I felt my body was full of energy. At one point, I heard a commanding voice, which told me to get a drink of water immediately. So I grabbed the large bottle of water next to me and started drinking. About halfway through, I felt like my stomach was about to explode. I rushed to the bathroom and threw up a huge amount of liquid. I realized that I hadn't urinated or drunk water in a long time. The next morning, as I walked out of the house, I felt a breath of fresh air and a gentle breeze on my cheeks. I looked into the distance and could see a beautiful sunrise. It was one of the most beautiful sights I have ever seen. Everything looked so beautiful. I remembered last night's experience, and it was so real and clear, it was as if it had just happened. I realized that my outlook on life had changed. In this experience, I understood that death is not an end, but another beginning. It is not that scary. I felt it was my responsibility to share my experience and help others gain some insight. After going through this experience, I learned to be grateful and appreciate the people and things around me. I realized that life is a precious gift and we should cherish it. This experience also made me believe in the existence of God once and for all. For years later, my grandfather was diagnosed with lung cancer. The treatment did not yield significant results. The doctors told us that my grandfather's time was running out. During that time, I was at home with him. I could feel his fear of death and his reluctance to let go of his family. He would often tell me about his fears for the future. Even though I knew that his departure was inevitable, I wanted him to have an easy time. I sat by his bedside and gently grabbed his hand. I told him that I had been through a death experience. I believe there really is life after death, and it is better than we can imagine. I described the light and beauty I saw in that space, and a feeling that could not be expressed in words. Death is not scary because our souls will continue to exist and move on in another world. I looked at his face and saw his eyes filled with tears, and I knew he was listening carefully to every word I said. I saw his expression become more calm. He told me that he had listened to me and felt braver and more determined in his approach to death. He said that my experience had given him some comfort, that he no longer feared death, and that he believed that his soul would continue to exist. We continued talking until he fell asleep. I gently put down his hand and left his room. A month later, my grandfather left this world. Although I felt very sad, I knew he had gone to a better place. I believe that sometime in the future he and I will be reunited again in heaven. This experience also made me understand my mission. I began to share this experience with more people, hoping to help those who are afraid of death. I told them that death is just a doorway to a better life and not to be afraid of it.